What's up, Mage Crew? Welcome to the Haunted Tales and Spooky Stories. In this story, we have Caroline, an alive woman, and a grave. How did she get there? It's narrated by Mercy Hyde from Kitsmo Media Group.
Welcome to Mage's channel. I am Mercy Hyde, and I am excited to be here today to share with you a spooky story that I have written. I wrote this story back in March of 2019, right before everybody had to lock away. So I hope you enjoy this short story. Thank you, Mage, for having me on your podcast this month. And let's get into it. The Grave by Mercy Hyde. Trembling beneath the dirt, trying to get out of this early grave, she could taste the dirt on her lips as she scratched at the box that confined her. How did I get here? She thought to herself. The last memory she had was when she was in Simmons Park. It was a beautiful day, the sun was setting, and she was reading a book underneath her favorite old oak tree. But how did I get here? She asked herself again, perplexed at her current situation, especially being confined in a box beneath the ground. She sat there for a moment. She noticed that there was an eerie sound, the sound of worms crawling against the coffin. It was her biggest nightmare, being buried alive, and she also despised worms, but also wondered why her hearing was so acute at the moment. Could it be because I'm away from the sounds of the world above? She asked herself. She didn't want to panic. She could hear the worms again, rubbing against the box, waiting to crawl between her toes and in her nose. She felt chills go down her spine at the thought. Be strong, Caroline, she thought to herself. I need to get out of here before the oxygen runs out. A thought that was truly scary, but at the same time made her feel the need to survive. She kicked at the lid of the box. She could feel it come loose some. I'm not buried all too deep, nor am I sealed all that tight. How did I get here? She asked herself again. She kicked at the lid one more time, and it gave, the dirt going deeper into her mouth as she spit it out and reached up, digging her way out of the shallow grave. She was coughing up dirt as she got to the surface, looking around at the night sky. I wasn't even put in a proper coffin, just a regular wooden box, like a storage box, one you'd find in a shed. But why? I never bothered anybody. I keep to myself. Who would do this to me? I don't have any enemies. She stood there for a moment. Maybe it wasn't an enemy at all. Maybe it was somebody I cared about. Whatever. Let's just get out of here, she thought to herself. And don't panic, Caroline, she told herself one more time. She finally got to the top of the grave. She could feel the cold night air on her skin, and it was refreshing. The breeze was going through the trees, and the shadows that danced in the night were alive and well. She coughed up more dirt, and to her dismay, some worms. She finally stood up and felt a large, sharp pain in her abdomen. Don't look at the wounds, she said. Figure out a plan. Use the adrenaline and get help later, she thought to herself. She couldn't feel her body at all. It was as if she was outside of her body and had no control whatsoever. A very weird and eerie feeling. Did she die for a little bit? Did she come back? What's going on? She thought it was just the adrenaline running through her, so she decided to make a plan. I can make it back home. From there, I can call 911 to have my wounds looked at properly. Yes, a very good and sound plan, Caroline, she said to herself. She walked out of the forest and onto the street. The street was an old dirt road where everybody knew everybody, but no cars really frequented this road. She didn't have a ride back, so she would have to walk back to the beautiful white house that she always adored. The white house with the white picket fence, with the rose bushes out front. It was everything she had ever hoped for. Everything. that her grandmother had worked to put together. She loved the little house that her grandmother left her and wanted nothing more to be back home and to get her wounds attended to. As she walked a mile up the road, she sat there and thought to herself, I really have no idea who could do this. She finally came to that white little house, opened the front gate, and made her way to the front door. Oh, crap! I don't have a key, she thought to herself. She was hoping that the front door would be unlocked because somebody is home. As she went to the door, she noticed that it was unlocked, and she slowly opened it, peering in. But she was surprised to see the sight she saw when she opened the door. There he was, sitting on the floor in front of their fireplace, covered in blood, sipping on an ice-cold brew with tears running down his face. His white shirt covered in dirt, soot, and blood. His hands were trembling at the deed he had just committed, but he had to do it. I had to do it, he thought to himself. I had to save her from this world. He wiped his nose. I had to do it. I had to save her from the world of pestilence and agony, he cried to himself. She is very confused by his words as she stands there watching him, burning a picture of the two of them, their two smiling faces from their first date, a cherished memory by the both of them. That picture hadn't left the wall their entire relationship. She watched as the fire engulfed both their faces and engulfed the whole picture, slowly but surely until it was nothing but ash. At that moment, she was snapped out of it. She starts to feel a deep, deep, sharp pain in her abdomen. She noticed that her stomach has been bleeding. She starts to wince in pain. The adrenaline is starting to wear off, she thought to herself. She decided to push the door open and make her appearance known. Once she does this, he turns and looks at her surprised. His face loses all color as if he's seeing a ghost. And then, at once, he slaps his knee, takes a sip of his beer, sets it on the table, and looks at her and says, Ah, crap, baby. I didn't bury you deep enough. I thought for sure you didn't survive, he said as he shook his head and was startled by her presence. She starts to cry, big tears streaming down her face from her emerald eyes. Why'd you do it, Ray? She started to feel the wounds on her stomach even more. Stab wounds. He had stabbed her and she had survived. He thought she was dead. The blood started pouring from her wounds. Ray looked at her intensely, staring into her emerald eyes with his gray ones, except his looked very soulless. There was no soul behind his gray eyes anymore. This wasn't the man she fell for. He grabbed her by the chin and looked at her lovingly. The world is hell, baby girl. You belong with the angels. The world doesn't deserve to be graced by your presence, he said, consoling her as he did many times before. She fell into his arms and he held her tightly, rocking her in his arms and kissing her forehead. She knows that she is falling away. She should have just stayed in that dark, cold grave. I belong with the angels, she smiled weakly. He lifted her up. Damn, baby girl, always fighting me when I know what's best for you. He held her close and kissed her forehead again to keep her calm. I'm getting sleepy, she says. I know, baby girl. That's why I put you in the box to rest up, pretty one. He looked at her with his gray eyes once more, full of what she took as concern. He picked her up and put her in the bed of his truck once more. Can you give me a blanket? I'm cold, Ray, I'm cold. I'm very, very cold, she asked sweetly. Even though she was 23, she had a sweet-toned voice, a voice of innocence. Of course, anything for my woman, Ray said, smiling a boozy smile. She felt so cold. The stab wounds were making her feel so sick. She looked up at the night sky as he drove her back to the plot in the woods. She smiled as the memories flowed back through her mind. The good times, the bad times, it was all so soothing to her, playing in her mind like a film from a projector. She was remembering meeting Ray in Simmons Park under that old oak tree. Their first date was a picnic under that old oak tree. So many memories. Ray was always loving and caring. But you know what? After all, he does know what's best for me, she thought to herself. She started to be less nervous about the situation. Ray knew what was best for her. When they reached the grave site, he stopped the truck and took out a shovel. She could hear him digging in the dirt to make her grave deeper. She kept looking at the stars with a smile. Soon I'll be in heaven. The world is a dirty place, she thought to herself. She started to hum her favorite song to herself. He was done digging the hole, and he heard her humming. You always had a beautiful voice, my love. He smiled down at her, stroked her hair, and started to pick her up. I love you, he told her. I love you too, she said with a weak smile. Will I keep hurting Ray? She asked him. Oh, nah, baby. You won't, I promise. Would I let you stay hurt? She shook her head. No, you'll always know what's best for me. He looked at her wounds, her pale skin in the moonlight, and she started to cough up blood now. I need you to trust me now, baby, before the world takes you. She nods, and her green eyes glisten in the moonlight. You look beautiful, baby. Like an angel, Ray? He smirked. Like an angel. He put her blanket in the box. This will only hurt a little. I can't have you running back. He hits her legs with a sledgehammer. She felt the bones break. Although she was in pain, she didn't let out a scream. He knew what was best for her. Tears streamed down her face as she felt the pain. She started to hum her favorite song again until her body went numb. I'm cold, she said faintly. Ah, now, don't worry, hon. I got you. He wrapped her up in her blanket nice and tight, as if he was tucking her into bed for the last time. He carried her to the box and gently placed her in as if she was about to have the best sleep of her life. Sweet dreams, my angel, he said with a smile. Sweet dreams, she whispered. He closed the lid of the box, and she could hear him shuffling the dirt on the lid of the box. Thud, thud, thud. She continued to hum to herself to hide the sound of the worms and bugs waiting to consume her once she had passed on. She hummed until she was too tired to hum any more. The last thing she heard was the truck pulling away and the worms coming to play. I hope you guys enjoyed this short, spooky tale. I was a little bit inspired by Stephen King's creepiness, so I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, keep checking out the channel, and thanks so much for having me. I'll see you guys in the next one.
That was Mercy's spooky tale. Give her support by checking out her Ko-Fi, Patreon, and subscribing to her YouTube channel. As well as check out our Ko-Fi and Patreon, follow, and subscribe. Thank you, and we will see you all back on December 3rd, 2024.